No buff, Meister. Hey buddies, Mr. Pugly here, coming at you with another Wonderlands build. Today I want to show you my version of Clawbringer Spore Warden that is able to defeat all the raid bosses, as you probably saw in the beginning. There's a few key interesting notes that you'll probably want to jot down when you make your own Clawbringer build. But before we get into the meat and potatoes of the video, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and follow me on Twitch on the top right. I've been streaming 5+ hours every single day on there. So if you're looking for Wonderlands streaming content, you're in the perfect place. You have no idea how much helps me out. And let's get into it.
Legendary? Whoa! No way, dude!
So first things first, let's actually talk about the skill tree itself. You might notice that there's not a lot of points put into the Clawbringer skill tree. Let's first talk about that. So the Clawbringer skill tree is a bit underpowered, to say the least, compared to other classes once you get to this point and down. Storm Smite is a long cooldown. It's almost not worth taking. And the few points that I don't have here don't feel that impactful for your build, or you could use those points towards another skill tree to be more powerful. Let's talk about the good of the Clawbringer tree, and let's talk about Oath of Fire. Now, Oath of Fire gives all your weapons a bonus fire damage of 20% at max, aka 5 out of 5. Now, I have an armor set that gives me 3 more points into this. As we go further in the video, you will learn that it's better to get more of these than less, because this really increases your damage by a lot. But the other important part is to get Dragon Aurora. Dragon Aurora allows Clawbringer to essentially be a jack of all trades for all elemental damage, but a master of none. So you can use essentially every single element you want and you'll still be good with it, especially since Dragon Aura boosts the damage of Oath of Fire as well as any elemental gun you are using. And I have 4 points into Oath of Thunder. Now, Oath of Thunder isn't too important. It really just lets me go down the skill tree a bit more to eventually get to these 2 points, but we'll talk about that in a moment. But it does give you 20% bonus lightning damage, so if you're looking for a melee Clawbringer build, get that. But this isn't a melee build, this is just filler points, but these are really good points just for you to know. Now, Blasphemet's Favor isn't too powerful alone, but with the Spore Warden setup, allow myself to proc Wrath of Nature because it does ability damage, thus allowing us to put a very nice debuff on any enemy that the orb hits. As you see here, my armor piece gives me a total of 2 out of 1 Blasphemet's Favor, which is really cool. I've noticed that the card damage compared to 1 to 2, it's very minuscule. As you see, it says 2 out of 1, which is 572. I'm going to unequip my class mod, and now you see it's only 440, which is a very small decrease, but I've noticed in the field it actually increased the damage by like 2 to 3 times, which is weird in certain instances. So the damage card number is a bit deceiving, but this isn't where the bulk of your damage is really coming from. It really is just a nice way to get a little chunk of HP out of the enemy, as well as proccing Wrath of Nature, which is the bread and butter of Spore Warden. Next, we have Firebolt, which increases your gun damage by 8%. I've also noticed that the Firebolt, since it leaves a fire damage puddle on the enemy, this is considered environmental damage, and it does a lot of damage compared to the normal damage that the Wyvern does. So Firebolt is arguably one of the most powerful abilities that the Wyvern can send out. It really is just great at killing enemies occasionally, but it really is just used in this build to get 8% more gun damage, which doesn't seem like a lot, but it's essentially 2 points of Eagle Eye, because each Eagle Eye gives you 4 points, while this just 1 point gives you 8, and a powerful damaging ability, Shrum the Wyvern. But otherwise, it's not too great, as all tier 4 and below skill tree abilities in the Clawbringer tree is. And I have Storm Breaths here, which doesn't seem too powerful, and the damage reduction is kind of niche because we have Sacrificial Skeep, but I didn't have any reason to put the point anywhere else, so we just have the point there for the extra survivability and the extra damage from the Wyvern. But the real reason why the build shines is because of the Spore Warden tree, because we have 5 points in Eagle Eye, which increases our gun damage by 20%, 5 points into Infinity to increase our Blasphemet's damage, our action skills damage, and Play the Angles damage, as well as increasing our Storm Dragon's Judgement damage, which is the ability that we are using on this build. The Storm Judgment Dragon allows us to proc Wrath of Nature, and it comes back really quickly, which allows us to proc a lot of our action skill starts that we have on our particular build. Next, we have 5 points in the Bullseye, mainly filler to get further down the skill tree, but the extra 50% critical hit chance is nice for certain weapons. We have 3 points in the Quiver of Holding. Once again, as my last build, this is another filler point, but it is nice utility occasionally to allow you to fire longer, and for certain weapons like Skull Diggers to essentially have more ammo, because we are using a lot of ammo really quickly in this build, with certain weapons at least. Then we have the Pet Revivability, which just allows us to essentially get back from Save Our Souls if that ever were to happen where we can't kill any enemies around us, which can happen. And then One Runner just allows us to get higher fire rate up to 24% and more movement speed, which is very nice. Armor Piece gives us Called Shot, which I don't think is too useful, but when you do aim down the sights, we do get a small damage boost, which is very nice. Now, once again, 3 points into Wrath of Nature. Wrath of Nature is a very good skill. There's no reason why you should never get it if you're a Spore Warden. It essentially is one of the hugest debuffs in the entire game. Now, you might be surprised that I don't have 6 out of 3 Wrath of Nature. Unfortunately, I can't seem to find any Clawbringer Spore Warden armor set that has a single Wrath of Nature. More to that is that I haven't seen a single armor piece with Wrath of Nature that wasn't Brrzerker and Spore Warden. So I'm kind of thinking that it might never spawn outside of the archetype of Spore Warden Brrzerker armor set drops, but I could be wrong. I would love if you guys could correct me in the comments down below, because I have not seen it spawn outside of that, which is very unfortunate. If I could potentially get more Wrath of Nature on this build, I would. And believe it or not, Oath of Fire, the extra points we have in here, does almost make up the difference. Not all the way, but it almost makes up the difference. In a perfect world, I would like 3 of these and then 2 Oath of Fire, but I can't seem to find that, but whatever. And then finally, we have Headhunter to get critical hit area damage, which is very good on Spore Warden as well. More critical hit damage, the better. And as well as Play the Angles, which just allows us to proc Wrath of Nature and occasionally kill the random enemy if it decides to deal a lot of damage, because sometimes it decides to deal a lot of damage and other times it does not. Now, our inventory is mostly the same. Most cryo weapons are really powerful in this game, so of course we're still using the Liquid Cooling and the Nightshade, but we're using 2 different weapons as well. I've noticed this shotgun, despite it not being elemental, if I could find an elemental version, that'd be perfect, is really powerful with the setup, as long as you can hit crits, but as well as having a Dark Magic Ruby Spite. Now, as I said earlier, the Clawbringer allows you to be a jack of all trades for all elements, so any elemental gun you pick up is going to deal a lot of damage no matter what, even non-elementals, which is the main reason why I'm using this one to showcase in this build, because you're still dealing elemental damage no matter what with your Oath of Fire, which is very powerful. Of course, on our Liquid Cooling, we have Action Skill Start. This is our main bossing tool to kill enemies really quickly, as well as the Nightshade Action Skill Start. Since we have our Storm Judgment coming back really quickly, we can activate this and almost have 100% uptime, because the cooldown of Storm Judgment is pretty low. Now, Ruby Spite, once again, Action Skill Start. This one, I would also like Action Skill Start, but I couldn't quite find it, and I maxed out my rerolls on this weapon, but the spell cast increased fire damage is very valuable, because we're dealing lots of fire damage on this build due to Oath of Fire and another particular thing we'll see in a moment. And once again, Action Skill Active, increase elemental damage. We want to try to get Storm Judgment out there as much as possible, so we have our Action Skill Active bonuses to deal more total damage, and Storm Judgment does a fantastic job at coming out there. It just doesn't last as long as Blizzard. To be completely transparent, if you really wanted to, you could probably use Blizzard on this build and still do really good. Storm Judgment just really lets you have an infinite uptime of Action Skill Start abilities, which is very valuable. And once again, we're using a Goblin Pickaxe to get our spells quicker and action skills quicker, because every single time we pick up a piece of gold, we're going to get our action skill back quicker and our spell back quicker, also increasing our movement speed, which isn't necessarily that important on this build, but it is a nice utility, as well as having every single time we melee someone, we spawn the gold, so we can actually get those bonuses if there's no gold on the ground at the moment. Once again, I'm using a gun damage ring, 2 of them, because we're trying to deal as much gun damage as possible. The more gun damage we deal, the more damage that the Oath of Fire is going to deal, because the bonus fire damage is based off the amount of damage that you deal, so the more gun damage, the better. The secondary stats aren't too important, but we do have pistol critical damage to allow our Liquid Cooling and Ruby Spite to deal more damage, as well as having SMG critical hit damage to increase our Nightshade damage as well. Also, we have longer action skill duration to allow us to proc our action skill active enchantments longer, which is very, very nice. Now let's talk about the armor set. Now the armor set, as I said, I could not find a single armor set with Clawbringer, Spore Warden that spawned with Wrath of Nature at all, so I had to settle as many Oath of Fires as possible. Preferably, you would want to have 5 out of 5. I could only find 3 out of 5 Oath of Fire. I'm not sure if you could spawn more, honestly, but ideally you would want 5 out of 5 to increase your damage as much as possible, but I'm going to have to live with 8 out of 5, which increases our damage by quite a bit. It has all damage dealt to increase our total damage and gun damage, so that's a 40% more damage to our gun damage, which is very, very good because the name of the game, of course, is gun damage, as well as using a body rune. While action skill is active, increase fire damage. We're using increased fire damage this time because Oath of Fire allows us to deal fire damage on all of our guns, which then allows our guns to deal more damage when Storm's Judgment is out, which is very, very valuable for a Clawbringer. If you don't have action skill active increased fire damage, you want to get it ASAP because it increases your Oath of Fire damage by a lot, as well as the body rune to increase your total bonus fire damage by an additional 20% and give you some survivability because whenever you kill an enemy, you also get 50% of your maximum HP back. This is my main mobbing tool, but if you're using bossing, I would recommend again using a Curse Wit. Now action skill active increased frost isn't ideal, but the increased frost does allow us to deal more damage because it increases our total damage of liquid cooling. The more damage our liquid cooling does, the more damage Oath of Fire will do. So this is still really, really good. In theory, I would like a fire gun to allow me to double dip. In theory, if this was action skill active increased fire damage, I would like a main bossing tool to be fire damage so we can double dip the fire damage at the same time, which I could possibly be doing with the body rune here. But I'll be honest, I haven't found a lot of good fire weapons, but you would want to try to find as many good fire weapons as possible to allow you to double down on this ability, because this would boost the damage of the gun, then boosting the Oath of Fire damage, and then this also boosts the Oath of Fire damage again. So it technically is a double dip, but not in the traditional sense that people think about, if that makes sense at all. Next, we have Sacrificial Skeep. Of course, I'm using Sacrificial Skeep. I found that Spore Warden power is a lot more valuable than Clawbringer power, so I thought this was still good, and increases our frost damage to allow our bossing tool to deal more damage. Now, our Sacrificial Skeep essentially allows us to health gate indefinitely for 10 seconds straight, which is very, very good, and this occurs every 30 seconds, which happens a lot quicker than you think because seconds go by really quickly in the game. So this just allows us to have survivability no matter what character we are, what setup we are, just instant free healing 100% of your HP really quick, and as well as healing your mushroom and wyvern. The mushroom healing is very important because you want the mushroom to be able to revive you, as well as increasing our Buffmeister. I noticed we're boosting frost damage still, so I thought a frost damage Buffmeister would still be valuable with action skill start increased gun damage by 30%, which then increases the damage of our Oath of Fire because, once again, as I said 1,000 times, more gun damage means more Oath of Fire damage. And just an example on why I think Spore Warden power is more important than Clawbringer power, as you see here, we have Play the Angles damage, which allows our total DPS to increase when it occasionally hits enemies, while our Clawbringer power really just increases our Blasphemet's Favor damage, and the Blasphemet's Favor doesn't one-shot people even when you max it out, so it's not that valuable to increase, as well as it increasing the Storm Smite damage, which has a long cooldown, so I'm not even using it on this build, and Rebuke I don't find to be very useful at all, so that's why I don't think Clawbringer power is that important on this build, but it does increase the Wyvern's damage and HP, which is nice for the occasional mobbing situation. Now my hero points is maxed out Strength, maxed out Wisdom, and a little bit into Entombment. Once again, we are trying to get our action skill back as quickly as possible to activate our action skill start and our action skill active. Since we're dealing lots of elemental damage with all of our guns, status effect damage really allows our dots to shine during any encounter, as well as Strength just being a very powerful stat on any build just to increase our total DPS by a lot. Now here are my myth ranks. Preferably, I would like to have maxed out fire damage, but I currently don't have that. If I had maxed out fire damage, this build would actually deal a lot more damage than it currently is, but I do not have that at the moment. And now let's stop delaying and actually show you this build in action with a regular mobbing situation in the Chaos Chambers here. No matter what element gun you use, you will be dealing lots of damage with fire damage, so I'm going to equip this weapon that doesn't have any element to it, and I'm going to show you the damage of this gun just baseline. So I'm just going to start shooting him, and you'll notice that there's fire damage coming out of the enemy right there. Now if I were to activate Wrath of Nature, our damage does increase by a lot more, as you saw right there, but the main idea is to make sure you have some elemental guns like right here to deal up the bulk of your damage, because Dragon Aura is going to increase your total damage. So you're going to be dealing lots of damage with any element gun that you use. So as you see right here, I am dealing lots of damage with this dark magic pistol, despite me being mostly optimized with fire damage and frost damage, but I'm still able to kill all these guys very, very easily. So the main idea with this build is make sure you have your Storm Judgement out and then you go to town on any enemy you hit, because Wrath of Nature is going to proc. Once you do that, you can just keep going to town even if Wrath of Nature isn't hitting any enemies. Play the Angles should allow you to proc Wrath of Nature on any enemy that you hit, as well as Blasphemous Favor, as you saw right there, targeted that guy, thus proccing Wrath of Nature, increasing our total DPS by 54% since it debuffs the enemies by that much. Now, once again, our frost weapons are still our best weapon. I'm going to equip our SMG, and you're going to notice our damage is a lot more with that. We're mainly using frost damage on our artifacts, so of course we're going to see a lot of damage from that. Now keep in mind, most of the gear I'm using is not volatile. The main weapon that is volatile is going to be my pistol, so if I swapped over to my pistol, you will notice my damage increases by a lot more. I'm going to start mopping the floor with these people. I'm going to activate my axe skill start. I'm going to start dealing as much damage as possible to all of these guys. They die really, really quickly because all the damage I'm dealing is also proccing Oath of Fire. So the more damage I'm dealing, the more damage Oath of Fire is dealing, which just allows it to melt people really, really quickly. Now, once again, you don't have to use that pistol to deal the bulk of your damage. You can still deal a decent amount of damage with your other guns as well. So I don't want you to think that this build is only good because of that one particular gun. It is able to use all guns pretty effectively for the most part, as long as it has an element. Preferably, if it has an element, it'll deal more damage. Of course, I'm mainly using elemental guns because that's what you should do, but you don't have to sweat it, because even with a kinetic gun like this shotgun that doesn't have any element, it's still able to deal a decent bit of damage. And just to show that one more time, I'm going to activate action skill start. I'm going to go over to this enemy since he now has Wrath of Nature. I'm just going to try dealing as much damage as possible to him. As you saw right there, it dealt lots of damage despite me not using the elemental gun, just because of the Oath of Fire allowing us to deal elemental damage on any gun we use. So we're still able to deal lots of damage no matter really what gun you do. Now, as I said before, I do think Clawbringer is a jack of all trades but master of none, so don't expect you to deal the most amount of damage as possible when using the Clawbringer, but is still able to deal a decent bit of damage. Because of this jack of all trades mentality I think Clawbringer currently has, you could essentially deal lots of damage with any setup, but you're not going to have any min-maxing with this build, which means you're not going to be able to deal the most damage as possible with Clawbringer alone. But if you want an easy time on just being able to kill any enemy you see without worrying too much about specific gear, like any specific elements or anything like that, you really just can go to town and kill all the enemies you see very, very quickly. Just to show you the speed killing ability of this build, I'm going to start doing this encounter and start just going to town on all the enemies that spawn here. I'm just going to activate my Storm Judgement like normal. I'm pulling out my best weapon here. I'm killing everybody I see just very, very quickly. And I'm not even using Buffmeister, but now I am. So now our damage is a lot better than it was in just a few moments. And now that the main boss spawned, I'm just going to activate Storm Judgement to activate Wrath of Nature, and then we're just going to go to town and kill her very, very easily like that. Now, despite the flaws with Clawbringer, I still think this build is very, very powerful and is able to get the job done fairly well, and it's a lot of fun to deal a lot of damage with any elemental gun that you use. And as always, a big shout out to the members who make these videos possible. We have Jason Noodles, Clairvoyance, Rick Iglesias, Super Noob, Josh Dig, 31 Bar 70, and Dormantazzi. These are the people who support me as little as $5 a month, and you can also support me as little as $5 a month by clicking the link in the comments or description or in the top right to become a member. The more members we have, the closer I get to becoming full-time, which means more videos for you guys. And as always, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. I hope you all have a great day. Bye-bye.
And the last shall be first to immerse in a pass out heat, facing him out with a moxie melt till he woke up drowning in tchotchke hell. War in a cave with a torch on a wall, then a window arrangement of porcelain dolls.